Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, the Planning Commission would like to welcome Mayor Boxelder Larry Larson to the meeting today. And outside of that, we have a new procedure, which most of you all have already heard from Cody. The Planning Commission now is going to utilize speaker request forms. If you'd like to speak on any item, please complete a speaker request form located at the table in the back of the chambers and return it to Cody, located on the lower right side of the dais right up here. It looks like everyone is here. Deb must have stepped out. Approval of the May 28 minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review? Is there any edits or corrections to that? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Approval of today's agenda. If there's no edits or adjustments to that, I'd entertain a motion of approval.
I so move.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Today's consent agenda, just a reminder for the public, if you'd like to follow along with all the items, there's a consent agenda, there's an agenda on the back bookshelf, or is it on the table now, PJ? Did we move it to
Still on the bookshelf.
It's on the bookshelf if you'd like to follow along with all the items to see what's on the agenda. All right, PJ.
All right, thank you. PJ Conover, Director, Planning Department. Good morning, Planning Commissioners. The consent agenda today. The following items have been placed on the consent agenda for action to be taken on all items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of the Planning Commission are recommendations to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners who will make the final decision. Item 3, conditional use permit review 80848 for Spring Creek Premier Property. Cody Shadd is the landowner to review the accessory structure, a garage and pump house without a primary structure in a limited agriculture district. Staff recommends to continue the review of conditional use permit 0848 to the June 24th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. Item 4, conditional use permit review 1406 for Dakota Time LLC. Julie Smorgowitz is the agent to review a recreational resort to allow up to 10 seasonal rental cabins, a manager's residence, a maintenance shop, and a kitchen on the subject property in the general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1406 with 19 conditions. Item 5, conditional use permit review 1419 for Christina Troutman to review an accessory structure, a shed or garage, prior to a primary structure in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1419 with 10 conditions. Item 6, conditional use permit review 1504 for Strata Bowl Vacation Homes LLC. Ken and Corey Tomovic as the agents to review a vacation home rental in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1504 with 15 conditions. Item 7, conditional use permit review 1808 for Ron Weifenbach to review a seasonal retail sales of Class C fireworks in a general commercial district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1801 with 10 conditions. Item 8, conditional use permit review 1813 for Randy Wurtzfeld to review a 12 by 12 cabin to be occupied on a seasonal basis on the subject property, not to be occupied more than 180 days per calendar year, located in a general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1813 with 7 conditions. Item 9, conditional use permit review 1815 for Coing Family Trust. Sheila Watkins is the agent for Idlewise Mountain Lodging. Idlewise Mountain Lodging is the agent to review a vacation home rental on the subject property in the suburban residential district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1815 with 13 conditions. Item 10, conditional use permit review 1816 for David and Karen Molden, I believe, to review a vacation home rental on the subject property in a low-density residential district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1816 with 15 conditions. Item 11, conditional use permit review 1817 for James and Laura Rogers to review a temporary labor camp on the subject property in the general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1817 with 8 conditions. Item 12, conditional use permit review 1826 for Kelly and Brenda Hansen to review a recreational vehicle to be used for no more than 180 calendar days on the subject property, and to also allow for a recreational vehicle to be used as a temporary living quarters while building a single-family residence on the subject property in the limited agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1826 with 13 conditions. Item 13, construction permit review 1714 for Cody Shad to review the construction of road construction outside of section line right-of-way and to satisfy conditions of approval from construction permit 1602. Staff recommends to end construction permit 1714. Item 14, construction permit review 1803 for site work specialist to review the construction of a new water main, also the installation of water service lines, fittings, valves, valve boxes, fire hydrants, and other items, which include surface restoration and other incidental work. Staff recommends to end construction permit 1803. Item 15, a road naming for Lauren Lippert to name a proposed 24-foot wide section line right-of-way providing access to the properties located in Section 2 and Section 11 of Township 1 South, Range 9 East of Black Hills Meridian, Pennington County, South Dakota to Lippert Ranch Road. Staff recommends approval of road naming to Lippert Ranch Road. Last item, item 16, conditional use permit 1912 for James and Jill Burnch to live in a recreational vehicle during construction of a barn, fences, and future residence on the subject property in the general agriculture district. Staff recommends approval of conditional use permit 1912 with 12 conditions.
Are there any, pardon me, are there any items staff would like to have removed?
No, sir?
Any items that the commission would like to have removed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like number 11.
11?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other members have any items they'd like removed? Any members of the audience like any items of the consent agenda, items 3 through 16 removed for further consideration? If not, they're going to be voted on in one vote. I see none. Do you have any speaker list for that, any of those items? Okay. So then that leaves us with a consent agenda at items number 3 through 10 and 12 through 16. I'd entertain a motion to approve those consent items.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Item number 11.
Yes, my concern is I see no indication as to the number of occupants in these labor cabins. And in all other instances, we list the maximum number of occupants. You know, it could be my prejudicial thoughts on the term labor camp, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
I was concerned that there is no indication as to how many people may occupy each cabin.
And that's a good question. I originally wrote this back in 2018, and Cassie took it over for review this year. The people for the labor camp is for, it's actually a working ranch, and it's a seasonal occupation of the ranch hands,
Yes.
basically. I don't remember the exact number, but I do know that the septic system was sized appropriately for the numbers that they were requesting. But I do not see it in this staff report, and we've asked Cassie to come down because most of the staff is down here for presentations today. We have a skeleton crew upstairs, so
Sure.
she'll be coming down and she can address that.
Yeah, I just didn't know if they had 2 people per cabin or 20. I mean,
Yeah, I'm sure, I
and
know
I
it was
don't know
over
if we
2 and
have-
less than 20.
yeah, well, I don't know if we have any control over that, but it was just an item.
Yeah, well,
that
we
I had
do because of the
concerns with.
septic, so you're right to bring it up.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Rich.
it appears to me that the applicant on item 11 has to provide receipts for having the holding tanks pumped. So I'm not sure septic comes into play, but
Brittany was going to,
Brittany
was
can
into something. I see
clarify.
Cassie walking in the door.
Good morning, Brittany Molitor, Environmental Planning Supervisor. It looks like they have a bulk privy out there, so basically it's an outhouse with a holding tank underneath. It takes a really long time for those to fill up, because it's just black water. So that's how that condition come into play. It
Sure.
doesn't look like they're utilizing a lot of water out there. I'm not sure if there's any
And-
wells or anything, but they have a bulk privy.
Yeah, and my concern wasn't with whether or not the septic system was functional. My concern was with how many people they were putting into the cabins.
Right, and typically for like a porta potty or an outhouse type of thing, ours is like 1 to 50 typically, because like I said, it's a pretty large tank and it takes quite a bit to fill it up. And even if they pump it every year, it would probably be adequate for that.
Yeah, and again, that was not my concern.
Okay.
Cassie Bolstead, Assistant Planning Director. It's my understanding in speaking with this family, it's three brothers that go up there and use these cabins during different seasons with cattle. I don't know, I know they all have children. I don't know how many of their children they take up there with them, but I don't believe there's any employees or anything additional up there other than the three brothers, wives, and maybe a few children
Yeah,
that are
I
up there
just didn't
helping.
want it to be inhumane conditions.
All right. Any further questions for staff? All right, thank you very much. You have any other questions, Sandy?
No,
Any other members like to speak on behalf of this item? Seeing none, current recommendation is staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit CU 18-17 with the following 8 conditions. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. That takes us to item number 17.
Crazy one. Good morning, Brittany Molitor again. Item number 17 is to allow a recreational vehicle to be lived in while constructing a single-family residence. As the property exists today, it's zone low-density residential district. It contains 7.42 acres. Access is off of Thunderhead Falls Road. Thunderhead Falls Road is a Pennington County Highway maintained road. There are more than 40 lots on this dead-end road. The property as it stands today is vacant of any structures. There is special flood hazard area on this property, including floodway. The property owner did submit a site plan showing the approximate locations or proposed locations of the RVs. Staff is recommending that they utilize site number 2 since it will be outside of the special flood hazard area. There was a concern whether a building permit could be issued along this or on this property due to the fact that it does not meet our subdivision regulations as far as having greater than 40 acres on a dead end road. However, this lot was platted prior to the enactment of our subdivision regulations. So it would allow a single family residence to be constructed on this lot. There was some disturbance on this property when staff went out to post the conditional use permit sign, but staff has spoken with the
Next to a
applicant and he had indicated that he was doing some fire mitigation work that caused the disturbance, and that the disturbance was under the 10,000 square feet that would require a construction permit. And also staff was made aware at the last meeting, I know that this was on consent at the last meeting, that the notice of hearing letters were not sent out for the originally advertised meeting date. So they were sent out for this meeting date. There are considerations when looking at a conditional use permit. The first one is the effect upon the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the uses already permitted and upon property values within the immediate vicinity. Staff, it appears that by allowing this conditional use permit, there should be no negative effects on the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity. Staff cannot predict what the impact may be on property values. However, this use is temporary until the single-family residence can be constructed. The effect upon the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding vacant property. Allowing this conditional use should not affect the normal orderly development or improvement of any surrounding property in the area. That utilities, access roads, drainage, and or other necessary facilities are provided. The applicant has indicated they will be installing an on-site wastewater treatment system to serve the proposed single-family residence. The proposed RV must be connected to that system while it's being utilized as living quarters. And that the applicant will need to obtain a approach permit from county highway. That off-street parking and loading requirements are met. This property is large enough that that should not be an issue, and that measures are taken to control offensive odor, fumes, dust, noise, vibration, and lighting, so that these will so that none of these will constitute a nuisance. This proposed conditional use by its very nature should have limited odor, fumes, dust, noise, vibrations, and intrusive lighting. So staff is recommending approval of conditional use permit 1908 with 12 conditions.
Any questions for staff?
Couple.
Go ahead. Ed?
So, Brittany, how much land besides can they build on that's not in the floodway or the flood hazard?
There's a considerable amount. If you look at this map where the proposed RV locations are,
Yep, that's what I'm looking at.
yes, they do have area where they can still meet the setback and be outside of the special flood hazard area.
So when they were disturbing the area with their site plan for their house, were they digging by the creek or they were digging away from the creek?
No, it was closer to the road.
Okay.
This is the site plan that was submitted by the applicant that shows the general area where they were doing the disturbance. It's in that shaded area.
Okay. And they were under the 10,000 square feet?
Yes,
So they
they
didn't
had
need a
submitted
permit.
that it was a little over 8,000, and also, in our ordinance, if they are doing, work for fire mitigation, it is exempt from the construction permit
Which is a good thing.
requirement.
So how many lots or how many platted lots in that area do we have already? And then how many people are living basically in that area already?
There are 57 platted lots along that road. I didn't check to make sure that every single one of them had an address point. One of the lots is Forest Service land.
Okay.
Two of the lots have overnight camps. One is a Presbyterian camp and one is a Salvation Army camp. But I will talk about those more in the layout plat further in the request,
Okay.
or further in the agenda.
And when we had the Salvation Army camp come up, I had them do some extra work and some emergency management plan because they weren't just affecting themselves, they were affecting others when they were in that area. And I'll keep saying, guys, this is Thunderhead Falls. You have one way in, one way out. That's my concern. And you know, the flood level or the floodplain levels right now, when impactful and otherwise, are up. So it takes one incident for us to overload an area that has one access in, one access out. And I know some of that's personal responsibility. They decided to live by a creek, that kind of thing. But you have 57 platted lots in an area. Try to get 57 people out at once. When you have a high creek and once that bridge is gone, where are they going? Because they're surrounded by a creek. So those are my concerns. If someone wants to live there, that's personal responsibility, but I'll keep saying, people never think it's going to happen. So I don't know what we do in this case, but I'm just something, food for thought, basically. I'd hate to be responsible for not being able to take 57 people out, which is going to be more because that's 57 lots out of an area with one access in, one access out. So
And it appears that the river crosses that road 3 different times or goes underneath it 3 different times. So there's 3
Yes.
points.
and they're surrounded by it and they only have one bridge to take them out. So you're not going to be able in those other areas, if the creek is full and flooded, where are you going when you're surrounded by creek? So I don't know what we do in the future with this, and this lot has already been platted, Miss Brittany,
Correct.
which means legally,
Right,
Yeah.
most of the lots, I did go through most of the subdivisions of the Register of Deeds last week. Most of these lots along Thunderhead Falls were platted in the 1960s. There were only 2 plats that were done, I think, after 2000, that they were 1 lot to 2 lot type of instances, but those were both prior to our subdivision regulations.
my bottom line is, so these people know that is a concern of the county and it is of people that emergency services and first responders have said over and over again, remember, we have to take these people out when you guys decide you're going to put more people in. And that's a lot of people for first responders to try to save when a flood comes through or that creek is overbearing, because we've been doing that lately, where even culverts have been washing out, and some of our bridges are up to 40 years old. So just a concern of the person, Mr. Shear and his family that are gonna be living there, let alone in an RV now. So, thank you.
Any further questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
My question's about erosion and sediment control. It's not in the conditions, but would that just be part of the building permit, or should we have that somewhere else?
We, under our ordinance, the planning director can direct any construction to meet our stormwater quality manual. I did mention in this that, I would like to see some kind of erosion sediment control to protect the creek, along that backside, during construction.
So the work they're doing right now doesn't require a permit, is that?
It doesn't require a permit, but that does not mean that they don't have to meet erosion sediment control requirements.
Okay, so when do we require those to be implemented?
For any construction. So if we do a site visit and we have concerns with potential, and let me see, did I put that as a condition in here? No, I did not. So that may be a condition of approval for this if you'd like.
Okay, I'd like to add that condition to require the erosion and sediment control. How to word that, however, I'm not entirely sure.
To implement.
Sorry, yeah, I might be able to save this. Sorry.
That's okay.
Sure. Anytime a building permit is issued, erosion sediment control, basically construction permit requirements are required. So we would keep up on it with that. And now that we have a dedicated employee to look after things like that, Mr. Sack over there, it'll be better for staff. But they are required in every building permit regardless of structure. In this case, it just happens to be a single-family home.
This building permit's not been applied for yet?
No.
So with the work that's being done for fire mitigation, because I'm looking at the analysis and when this was mentioned that staff requires the control, so I just wonder when that gets required
So you're saying outside of the building permit?
outside of the building
So-
permit for the
Yep.
groundwork that's being done there.
I know Brittany and Cody have been working on it, so maybe they have a schedule of plans, so I'll leave it to them.
I mean, we could add it as a condition, just that the property owner implement erosion sediment controls beforehand as part of the requirement of the conditional use permit.
So is that number 13, Brittany? If
That would be number
okay,
13.
Sonia, is that what you're looking for? What she
Yes.
worded? Okay,
that'd be number 13.
adding number 13. Are there any other questions for staff on this item? Members from the audience, I have one speaker request form from a Shannon Vasknets.
Yes, Shannon Vossitz from Baseline Surveying. Basically, my request form was more for the preliminary plat than,
Item 21.
so,
Okay, so you have anything to add on this one?
no.
Okay.
I do know that, I mean, I know Jeff has plans for a pretty significant home in that area, so the camper definitely is temporary, so, or the request he's making, so.
All right, thank you. Any other members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item? Okay. All right, then. Current recommendation is approval of the conditional use permit 1908 with the following 12 conditions. We added a 13. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
A second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, no.
No,
Motion carries.
thank you.
Item number 18.
Morning, Commissioners. Jason Fennison, County Planner. Agenda item number 18 is conditional use permit 1911. The applicants, Paul and Rebecca Friedel, have requested a conditional use permit to allow a modular home to be used as a guest house in a low density residential district. They're in the audience if you have any questions for them. As it stands today, the property is currently zoned as low-density residential district consisting of 5.57 acres. takes access off of Longhorn Court via an existing approach and private access easement. The request was sent out for interdepartmental review. One request, or one comment of significance from the county environmental planner, stating that the applicant added to the existing septic system and that it is adequately sized to accommodate the guest house. Applicant's plan is to move a modular home to the subject property for use as a guest house. Guest house dimensions are 16 by 40. Will consist of 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen living room, a utility room, and a closet. Guest houses in Pennington County are governed under Pennington County zoning ordinance, section 318, which contains 13 requirements. They meet all of them, but I think 2 of them are worth talking about. First one being the maximum allowed living space for a guest house shall not exceed 50% of the living space in the main dwelling unit or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. Department of Equalization has a living area in the primary residence at over 5,000 square feet. This means that the proposed guest house cannot exceed 1,000 square feet. The second requirement that we have is a single-wide mobile home shall not be used as, or shall not be allowed as a guest house. Based on conversations with the applicant on June 5th, the proposed guest house meets the definition of a modular home as it has no chassis and will be placed on a permanent foundation. Zoning ordinance lists 5 factors that Planning Commission may consider when they're in their review of conditional use permit applications. They are as follows: the effect upon the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the uses already permitted and upon property values within the immediate vicinity. This conditional use permit should not change the residential use of the property and thus should not have any long-term negative effects on the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity. Staff cannot predict the impact the use may have on property values in the surrounding area. Of note, as of writing the staff report, one neighbor has come forward with concerns about adding a guest house to the subject property. The next factor to consider is the effect upon normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding vacant properties for uses predominantly in the area. Allowing this conditional use permit should not affect normal orderly development or improvement of any surrounding vacant property in the area. That utilities, access roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities are provided. The subject property will be served by a private on-site wastewater treatment system. Access to the subject property is provided via an existing approach and private access easement. And lastly, that the off-street parking and loading requirements are met. Pennington County zoning ordinance requires 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling unit and 1 additional off-street parking space for a guest house. Therefore, 3 spaces would be required on the subject property. It appears there are sufficient parking spaces on this property and it meets this requirement. Lastly, the measures are taken to control offensive odors, fumes, dust, noise, vibration, and lighting so that none of these will constitute a nuisance. Proposed conditional use by its very nature should have limited odor, fumes, dust, noise, vibrations, and intrusive lighting. The applicant should take care so the proposed use does not create the above listed elements in the amount that would constitute a nuisance. After taking these factors into consideration, staff recommends approval of conditional use permit 1911 with 11 conditions.
Any questions for staff?
Yes, sir.
Yes, go
Mr.
ahead, Sandy.
Chairman, I have 2 questions. Number 1, I'm curious as to what concerns the neighbor had, because I don't see any letter of correspondence in here. And my second comment is, maybe it's just because I don't understand, but why do we care if the primary residence has been classified as owner occupied? I mean, it was my understanding that that was merely for the decrease in your real estate taxes. Other than that, I didn't know why we cared whether or not they classified it as owner occupied.
For your first question, talking about the neighbor that had the issues, it's this property here to the south where they share this access, and it is filed with the Register of Deeds that this is an access easement, and it is shared. But they have a concern about it increasing the amount of traffic that's coming through that shared easement.
Okay, but the recorded access easement does not dictate the number of vehicles that can
Right, right. I'm
traverse
just stating their
across it.
concern.
Okay. And then the owner occupied status?
Owner occupied status. Need a lifeline here.
That was a condition that was put into the zoning ordinance some time ago. This came up a couple of years ago during a conversation and spoke with Shannon Rittberger from Equalization. He didn't really have anything from the planning side or history-wise as far as what happened. The best that we can assume is that what the county was trying to prevent was a two-structure rental property.
I see. Thank you. That makes sense.
Any further questions for staff?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Deb.
I'm gonna guess they're right. With the commercial, if you are, renting the property, it's a whole lot different making a decision than if you own the property for most people. If they were going to have their single-family residence and then go rent that property next to them, that's you're basically, you got a whole new classification in it. And if I'm correct, I think you have to plat or do something different with the way you, do your property. Because you can't just turn it into a commercial property there and into a rental. That's why they want to tell you owner occupied, Miss Sandra.
Thank you.
So this also has one access into it, but I've driven this many times with staff because there's only that one bridge. The common sense on this one is you could go south or you could go east and still get out of this property. So for me, it's a lot different than the last one with one access. I still believe people could move in and out of there, even the emergency services, and get out. So in this case, I think that's a whole, so people don't think that when they say this is one access in, one access out, because I said no on the last one, it's a whole different ballgame when you can get out on flat land than you can be surrounded by a creek. So,
Just to note, there is no special flood hazard area on this property.
yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any further questions for staff? Seeing none. Any members of the audience? I've got two speaker request forms, one for Paula Kerr. Hold on, just go up to the speaker and state your name, please. The mic.
Okay, thank you. I'm also a neighbor. I live just down the road a little ways from these guys, and
Can you state your name, ma'am?
my name is Paula Kier. I live at 23566 Longhorn Court, and I have a couple of concerns. My main one, I think, is the well system and the water pressure. Therefore, leads me to the amount of people that might be there. I don't know about the regulations. I'm here seeking information mostly, but I want to express my concerns in case something comes up later. There is already a problem with our well system and the water pressures that we're working on, and so I'm concerned that that will be an added problem, decreasing my pressure. And causing problems with the well, having too many people on it. I don't know myself how many people are allowed on our well or in our residential community out there, but that's a concern of mine because the pressure is very low, and so it might become a financial burden for me if I have to come up with a pressure pump on my own. My other concern would just be compliance and accountability for the guest house regulations. I'm not aware of all those regulations, but I have noticed an increase in traffic. I live out there because I want peace and quality of life, and so I am concerned about the amount of traffic and people. I don't know if that would be a concern. I'm just asking that you maybe consider that. I believe that Glenn and Wanda have submitted a letter to you via email, and I've read through it, and my concerns are addressed in their letter. So if you don't have it, maybe we could. I guess it would be up to them to make sure that's submitted to you. Otherwise, I'd like to know, do we still have 5 days to write a letter if we choose to, or is that time period up?
You would still have 5 days.
Okay, so if I need to create my own letter of concerns, I would. I would like to address them beforehand rather than, you know, consequences later on. It's the only reason that I'm here.
I'll let PJ explain. He stepped up here to kind of walk you through that process, I'm guessing.
Sure, and two quick things if you'd like, and if it's okay with the chair, staff can take that and make a copy and give it to the commissioners today so they have it to make the
Okay.
decision.
Right.
And as far as appeals on planning commission decisions for conditional use permits, you have 5 business days, so that would be up at 5 a.m. next Monday.
Okay.
Okay? All right. If you'd like us to make a copy, just hand it to us and we can run over and make it.
If that's okay.
PJ, can you tell her the process of the appeal, meaning
Oh, sure,
what
ma'am.
happens with her appeal?
Sure, thank you. So the appeal just needs to be in writing and submitted to our office before 5 p.m. next Monday. We even take emails, if that's a better way for you. And then when it gets appealed, then it'll be put on the next available Board of Commissioners meeting for a hearing.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, then, I've signed and dated this. I would just like you to know that I support these concerns, and I'll put an X on the 2 that are my personal concerns.
Ma'am, you indicated that that letter had been submitted to whom?
I'm not sure. I would have to ask Glenn and Wanda.
Can I get you to speak into the mic, please? Oh, she's going to speak to it next, so.
Okay, so I guess that's all I have. I would just like you to know that I support their requests, and those are my concerns also.
Before you step away, did anybody get that email? Okay,
No, I do have another question of her.
okay.
All right. You indicated you're in a community well.
Yes.
Do you know how many people, how many families are currently on that well?
I don't. The only thing I do know is that I've been out there about 10 years, and when I moved in, if I remember correctly, I was told that we had already exceeded that amount of people on the well, and I don't know whether there's new homes that have come in since
Okay.
then.
And
but
is the well owned by the lot owners, or is it owned by a separate ownership entity?
I don't know that.
Okay,
I can't
thank
answer
you.
that for you.
PJ, can we get a staff member, if she's willing to let us have a copy of what she has, to make copies so that we can at least review that? Ma'am, if you don't mind providing that to PJ so they can get a copy.
Everything on there is okay? Because it
Yes.
becomes part of the official packet.
Yes.
Okay, just the
Thank
front
you.
page?
This one by you too.
She has the whole letter here. I've just, if you would take this would just be my personal notes and my signature that I've added, so
Sure.
that you know I support that.
Any further questions for Paula? Okay, thank you very much.
Is her name Paula?
Is
Her name Paula, right?
Glenn Miller, is that Martha and Glenn Miller? Or Wanda and Glenn Miller? Okay.
I have the unfortunate pleasure.
Go ahead and state your name in the microphone, please.
I'm Wanda Miller, and I have the unfortunate pleasure of being the first resident of Cedar Gulch subdivision when it was built. So I do have a little bit of knowledge on it. There's 14 residences on the well. The well is owned by a homeowners association. There is a limitation as far as how many residences can be on our well due to some of the qualifiers on our testing for our water system. So we can have 14 residences, but we can't exceed a certain number of people in addition to that. And I don't know I can't remember the exact number of people. Gordon Howie originally did this subdivision. But from what we were informed of by the state when we began our testing process about almost 15 years ago, because we failed the radon testing and some other stuff out there. As a result, we were limited to the number of people that can actually use the well, not only the number of residences, and we exceed that. My concern with the guest house is, and I understand, I just spoke to Paul here a little bit ago coming in. I understand that his intent is to only put one person in the guest house, but from what we already know, this easement was granted under certain conditions also. Those people died, and they were my parents. And there was no anticipation that it would have the amount of access it has now and stuff. So we understand that once a property changes hands, things change dramatically. So although Paul only intends to put one person in the guest house, we don't know how many people the next person is going to decide to put in the guest house. We also know that septic systems are based on the number of bedrooms in a house. not the number of occupants. That house originally had 3 bedrooms, even though it's 5,200 square feet. The lower level was primarily completely open. And they ran a business, and that was mainly a storage area where my father stored materials. Anyway, currently, we've been told, we've never been in the residence, but we were informed by other neighbors that there have been some bedrooms added, which we have no concern with, other than the septic system is our main concern. The septic system was in bad disarray when Paul purchased the property. The property was foreclosed on when my father died. One side of the septic system had completely failed, so only one portion of the drain field was active. As a result, when they first moved into the property and for a period of time afterwards, we had septic coming above ground. And the wind blows out of the northwest directly to our house. So we were pretty well aware every time the septic system was having issues. They did do some work there. I don't know what they did exactly, but I do know what the original problem was, and that's where it was supposed to lie off to both drain fields. It did not. There was never more than 4 people living in that house during its previous occupancy. Paul has a rather large family, which it's a blessing that him and Rebecca do have a very large family. But the concerns on the septic system are that we would like somebody to ensure that the number of bedrooms that currently exist in the house, because we were informed by another neighbor that there's 5 to 6 bedrooms there now, along with the additional guest house, that septic system can adequately handle it. Our intention is to complete a remodel on our house and sell. And so for us, this wouldn't necessarily be a long-term concern, but we don't want to create a problem for a future resident who's going to be there either, okay? The water system, the reason it is a concern is because if we are losing pressure, we have a shared water line that comes up the hill. In order to maintain pressure from the main tie-in going all the distance of the driveway, which is well over 1,000 feet to both houses, we had to decrease the size of the line as it went up, or we have no pressure to get the water up the hill. The more usage it's having, especially at our house, we do have a pressure pump, and it can't keep up. And we have very little pressure now. So we're going to increase the size of our pressure pump in order to try to keep that functional. But the other concern really is the number of people that are accessing the well, the number of people using the well, and the problems we're currently having with the well. Cedar Gulch Subdivision 2 has obtained some assistance through some the School of Mines came in with a group and another group from out of the area, and they're addressing their concerns with radon. Our issues, we qualify for a test program where right now we're using water softeners in the house and we're testing them. And then if we pass that testing, perhaps that'll be the solution to our radon level. The other part that they're looking at with that, though, is that we had to turn over ownership of all of our water systems, including our water softeners, to the homeowners association, so that they own our wells, they own the water softeners, everything else. So this is not a situation where you have a private well where somebody's putting an additional residence on the property. This is a community well system in a homeowners association, and it does impact the other people that are part of that homeowners association. So our other concern is if Paul puts in a guest house, we have 14 residences out there that would all qualify to put in a guest house on a system that probably could not adequately handle it. When I say it has 5,200 square feet, we have seen debris coming out of the house, and we understand that. We've done stuff in our own home too, as far as the remodel goes. So our concerns are the size, the number of people that it's already serving, the number of bedrooms affiliated with the septic system, water pressure getting to the house. The driveway, we fully realize, is our problem, not anybody else's problem. But we would at least, when there's an ordinance that says that it's not going to impact negatively the people around them, then I think it's your obligation to take a serious consideration of that.
Quick question for you. Do you have any of the documentation about the limited number of persons on that well? Is there a signed document or something of that nature that you have in your
I
possession?
don't have that, but I know that Gordon Howie could provide that. And being honest with you, I work an incredibly tight schedule. I'm sure most of you do also. So during the time I got this letter, I honestly did not have the time to make contact with Gordon to get on board with that. I know Simon's Contracting did the original dirt work. And I know that Gordon at the time wanted to plot more lots and was not allowed to due to conditions that were in place at that time. That's why we only have 14 residences there. It's also the reason that initially other residents in the area were supposed to be allowed to tie into our well. And if, that was part of their agreeing to the subdivision coming up there. And that was not allowed due to the limitations of our well itself. So that is why none of the adjoining residences out there have been allowed to tie into the well itself.
Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Deb.
do you have a follow-up first? Sorry.
I was going to ask a follow-up, but go ahead. You might meet to it, because I got to think it through a little bit.
Okay. Couple of things. Do you have the easement conditions with you, or that was recorded about what those conditions were for these people to be able to get that access through your property?
The access at the time, it was my mom and dad, so it was pretty open. We simply granted them an access easement and a utility easement, and they granted us one. You can see where, well, when they had it up there, you can see where we had an existing driveway, and Paul had the property resurveyed and determined that our access to our driveway was in the wrong place, which is odd because we had it surveyed after it was already built. But that surveyor currently, Ben, works for another survey company. We've contacted him and he's going to resurvey again for us because he was the original surveyor. So we did build a new driveway as a result of that. The posts were put across ours. We built a new driveway. We've, I think, done everything to be in
So
to the
ma'am,
point where we're not, causing a problem out there.
so ma'am, you don't have the easement and the conditions, and you don't know them?
I don't think there were, and I'm pretty, I do have them. I didn't bring with me today, but we were in another incident and they are on the, I do know that there's no real guidelines to it other than it is an easement for both people.
Thank you,
There's no
ma'am.
restrictions.
And a couple of things, maybe Brittany too, because they're concerns. Doesn't the DENR limit so many people on a well? And she had talked about, Miss Miller had talked about that they're over the limit. Doesn't DENR regulate how many people can be on a well before something else needs to trigger and they have to redo the well or do something with the well at that point, don't they?
That is correct. They go under regulation when there's 15 homes or 25 people.
Okay, and you don't, in those 14 residents, you don't believe it's went over 25 people? Just
It's
asking.
15 homes or 25
You can tell
people.
by your face.
I mean, it would be up to
So it's-
DNR if they would want to pursue to verify that. But we usually do the 15 homes. That's typically when we notify them that there may be a concern. But the property owners out there, if they are concerned, they are, they have the ability to.
So if we grant this as the 15th home, that they could bring us back that verification, the person that wants this guest house, that well isn't over limited and needs to have something else done. Could that be one of the conditions on here?
Right. Typically, when there's like 15 homes, or you go into a community system that's regulated, which requires an operator, it requires monitoring, submittal of water quality data. There's certain things that come into play once they hit that threshold. So whether that guest house would kick this into that regulation, that would be a question for DENR, which I could certainly find out if that's the commission's
I
wish.
think being the concern of people, and if I lived out there, if my water pressure was going down, you already know. They're either gonna have to have boosters or that well's not being able to take it all. And not that we usually regulate us through that, but it also means 15 homes. The other thing is the septic. At this point, have we checked the septic to make sure it's in compliance and it's being able to not have the leach and the smell and the stuff coming from the top? Because that tells me it's failing or it needs to be pumped or it's not been maintained.
That system had previously failed. The property owners did put in a new system. They have 3,000 gallons of septic tank capacity. They have two 1,500-gallon tanks, and they have a little over 1,400 square feet of drain field, which is pretty considerable.
And so it would be able to handle this guest house?
Yes, it's size for 6 bedrooms, I believe, total.
And can you tell me, Brittany, by chance, if this was going to be a rental or a lease, or it's just a house for one of their family members?
A guest house cannot be rented or leased. It just has to be utilized by family, less than 180 days per year.
So it's a restriction for family.
That is my understanding, that there's a deed restriction that's put on this, not allowed to be rented.
And we can put this on here, basically, do we put that as a regulation or it's just a given?
That's already
Already
written in
there.
the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jim.
Now, do I understand that this subdivision, that all of the lots are thus occupied, is that correct?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so it was like you started with 14 or 15 or 14 lots, and they've all been sold, and it's been defined, okay.
Right, that was why Gordon didn't add the additional lots. He originally wanted to plot us down to 3.5 acres per lot, and he was not allowed to because they stipulated it could only be 14 lots.
Okay.
14 residential.
So you bought in with the assumption that there would be 14 lots?
Absolutely,
And you
yeah.
sized your well accordingly under the circumstances? Okay.
Right.
That was my question.
Any further questions?
I still have my original question. Who owns the well? Is it owned by a separate individual, or is the homeowners association the owner of record of the well?
The homeowners, well, Gordon retained 51% ownership of the well. He still holds that. He maintained 51% ownership of the well because he intended to sell off rights to tie into that well until he discovered that we were not allowed to do that. He still does currently own 51% of the well. The homeowners association owns 49%.
Thank you.
Any further questions for?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Rich.
I'm inclined to have this issue maybe be postponed into the next meeting. It seems to me that there's a lot of facts that are missing here. One, the septic issues. Two, the facts about the water system, what it can and can't handle, and the details associated with that. And I'm wondering if the concerns or the folks that have the concerns can submit this information to the county, and perhaps we can have a chance to review that. It sounds like there's several competing issues out here that probably require a little further investigation.
I happen to agree with that.
I agree.
I agree too with, also Chairman, because of, I'd like to know the 15 rule. Does that make sense, whether it's a guest
Correct.
house or, for me, it doesn't matter. If it's 15 properties on there, meaning 15 houses, should it exceed it? And are they past that and something else needs to kick in? Because that might change, and that might bring about 13 other people in when they gotta
Right.
change that well and cost them some more money once we regulate it past the 15 or we're at 15.
Agreed. Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
As long as we'll all likelihood continue this and get some additional information, I think would be important to clarify is that it's my understanding with the DENR rule, it has nothing to do with the ability of the well. The 15 house rule has nothing to do with the ability of the well to provide adequate water. It simply is a different category. So you go from, I think the term is, right now it's a community well, then it goes to a public
Yes, ma'am.
water source, which just requires more testing and so on.
Yep.
So it doesn't address the capacity and the ability of the water supply in the well. So if indeed the water supply it currently doesn't sound like it's really adequate to support the residents in that area, the fact that we're adding a guest house won't change that. It's still not suiting the needs of the residents. So I think we need to make sure that we don't conflate these issues of the fact that the water supply right now, it sounds like it needs some help. And so we just need to, keep that clear that, I'm not sure that the guest house should be, part of the equation to address something that already needs addressing. Is what I'm really getting at. So if we're going to gather more information, I'd just like some clarification that that's, more or less correct.
Basically, it should tell when you had that many more people, though, the contaminants and stuff that they had talked about on the radon, which you already know, radon dissipates. We had a class on that basically from one of the mines people, but I think also it kicks in just looking at the whole situation with the well for this person and the surrounding areas. that it becomes public and what that entails, because I know that's more costs and more checking and different things like that.
Right.
So in the end, there's a lot more details than just what they're doing now. Thank you, Ms.
Chairman.
Kathy.
Yes, go ahead, Sonny.
I support continuing this too, but I have a question for staff first and a comment. I was wondering, adding the guest house, that doesn't actually increase density as far as the county is concerned, does it? When we talk about density.
No, because it's considered a temporary use, can't be more than 180 days in a calendar year. However, in the past, guest houses have been subdivided, often used as single-family residences down the line by other owners.
However, but in that area though, we already have it where we can't have more density, right? Because that's right off Patsky Road. There was a lot of stuff there's a lot of units out there. That density is already maxed out there, correct?
Correct.
So they couldn't be able to subdivide this out, would they?
They can always ask.
Fair enough.
We
Okay.
never tell them they can't ask.
Fair enough. Sorry, I
Okay.
just wanted to clarify, because I know we've had discussions in this area.
Good clarification. Similarly, if they had an addition to the house, added a bedroom to the primary residence, likewise, it wouldn't increase density.
No, we're
Correct.
going by unit itself.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking this is because it seems to me that having another person stay on the property doesn't necessarily increase the water usage any more than if they had the guests sleep on the couch. So I hear all the, I feel for the concern about the water volume, but probably, to me, in my mind, may not make a difference whether it's in a guest house or if the person was just staying in their primary residence, because it's a temporary situation.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead,
to
Jim.
Sonny's point and to Kathy's point, they decide to build a wing. Mother-in-law moves in with her boyfriend. Substantial increase to the water, presumably, but not really. And if the well is that close to the margin, it seems to me the problem is not to be addressed by prohibiting this extra structure here. I mean, I just don't think that you ought to be operating that close to the edge, and so I mean I think continuing this is perhaps it would make us feel better. I don't know, but I think I know kind of how I feel about it. That I think we should allow this, and that the issue of the well is a separate issue. I really do.
Any further questions or comments?
I'll make a motion to continue to the next planning commission.
Second.
Sure.
Motion in a second.
There's an audience member.
There's one other audience member that was not on the list. Should we go? I'd like to give him a. Say again?
You had a motion though?
Motion and
First
there was
and
a second.
Yep.
Yep.
You want to vote on that and then you bring the,
Then bring it back around.
yes, in case there's amendment or a change.
Fair enough. Currently, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that item? It's to continue. To what meeting would we be continuing it to? The next meeting?
June
Yes, sir.
24th.
June 24th. Okay. All in favor, signify by saying
Aye.
aye. Hit the button.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, no.
No.
Motion carries. I believe there's only one no. All right, and you're the property owner, sir? I'd like to hear him out since I didn't catch his hand earlier when we were discussing everything either. Sorry about that. And go ahead, state your name.
Thank you. My name's Paul Friedel. So I'm the property owner. I just want to give a little bit more background on some of these points. I have 8 kids, 7 of which are living with me right now. And we have a lot of family from Chicago, which currently stay with us at the house when they come to visit, periodically through the summer. So to Sonny's point earlier, it's really a question of whether they sleep in the house or we have a busy house, so it's easier for them to sleep in separate quarters, which is why we were anticipating that. So anyway, so that's our background. So we're not anticipating any change in usage. It's just a matter of having people stay in a different spot. And as far as to the extent this is helpful at all, if this is considered another residence and it puts our entire water system in another classification, I'd be inclined to drop this entire process. So I'm fine if that's a condition, as far as if that puts us in another category for the community. But it isn't a residence per se, it's an accessory structure, so I don't know how that works, but again, depending on how that's defined, I'm fine if that's a condition for approval, is if it's considered a residence and if it puts our water system in another category, I'm fine dropping it entirely. So, and we were at the end of the water line as well, so we had to deal with the water challenges. And again, I don't think it'll change the use too much. And on the septic, we did size it for 6-bedroom, and we have 5 bedrooms in the house. So this would be the 6th, and we have 2 tanks. So I think on the septic side, I understand the concern with the prior system, which was inadequate, but I think the septic, and in talking with the county, the septic should be fine, and that we took care of that and worked with the contractor on that. So that's what I had to say.
Any questions for the property owner? Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, say again?
No, I said thank you,
Oh,
sir.
just- all right. Any further action on this item? If not, then that will take us to item number 19.
Just one question. Brittany, will you send us the rules and regs on wells and so we all have the information on, is it 25 people or is it what you said? So I thought it was 25, but I'd like to kind of see those rules. And based on what Miss Kathy said, making sure we're looking at the right information and what the facts are on that. Thank you.
Good morning, Christina Proetti here, planner. I am going to bring up my current PowerPoint. I think these were put up earlier.
Yeah.
And I switched mine real quick. So I'm going to grab my more current PowerPoint slide. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. Item 19 is conditional use 1914. The applicant is requesting to have a multifamily dwelling unit on the subject property. This is so that eventually, I believe that they can have their sibling or their daughter come move into one unit, and then the parents would live in the additional attached unit. The existing lot is currently zoned as suburban residential district with the lot totaling 0.21 acres. Pennington County's future land use zoning has a subject property zoned as suburban residential district as well. It is located right out of city limits. It is tied on to the Rapid Valley Sanitary District system, so. Currently, there is one single-family residence with an attached garage and deck on the subject property. That's a view. The lot next to it is where it would be attached, or that's where they would propose to do construction. That's just showing the lot there.
Nice lot.
Here are plans of the proposed attachment. I did put the first and second floor plans in the report itself, but this is what the outside would propose to look like. Staff did receive one phone call from a citizen asking what was proposed here. The citizen didn't really voice either way, which way they were leaning. It was more just an informational phone call that I took. And other than that, it was routed through interdepartmental review. And there are really no other concerns, items of concern for this property. And staff is recommending approval with 7 conditions.
Any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Rich.
It looks like there's a chain link fence to the neighbor's property. Is the side yard setback going to be okay with the addition?
Yeah, they would have to meet their setbacks when they did. If it was approved, they would apply for their building permit and setbacks would have to be met.
Any further questions for staff?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? There is a speaker request on this particular item, so. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. There was a Linda who would like to speak on behalf of this item?
And that's me, and I think she answered my question. I was just concerned as to multifamily, how many
Okay.
people, apartment building, or, so, good, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Please come forward, ma'am.
And you were just approved.
Yeah.
I
was gonna say, you're just approved, so.
About this. My name's Dottie Pugsley. I own the property at 1640 Aurora Drive. And just for clarification, I'm the only resident in the house at this time. The addition would be so that my daughter and my future son-in-law and my grandson could live in the existing home, and then I will live above the garage. So I just wanted to clarify that for the commissioners, how that's gonna look. And the chain link will be gone as part of the bill.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to item number 20.
Morning again, Jason Tennyson, County Planner. Item number 20 is for rezone 1906 and comprehensive plan amendment 1906. The applicant Michael Gould has submitted a request to rezone 111.48 acres from general agriculture district to low density residential.
Jason, sir, you
Yeah.
need to speak in the mic, Jason.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, sir.
It drifted
Thank
away.
you. You're
Sorry
okay,
about that.
Jason. Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, the surveyor is here to answer any questions you may have. Applicant is also requesting to amend the Pennington County Comprehensive Plan to change the future residential use or future land use from limited agricultural district to low density residential district. Subject property is located within 3 miles of the plating jurisdiction of the city of Rapid City. Therefore, the applicant would like to develop the existing vacant land for residential purposes and allow plating within the 3-mile plating jurisdiction.
Any questions for staff? Or, I totally missed what you just said that last little bit. Never
Oh,
mind.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, go ahead.
As the property sits today, it's currently zoned as general agriculture district, consists of 111.48 acres, currently undeveloped and vacant. Current zoning within 1 mile. As you can see, there's low density residential district to the north. Property sizes range from 5 acres to 40 acres. There's also limited agriculture, general agriculture, and heavy industrial districts within the 1 mile. Future land use within 1 mile contains the 4 same zoning districts. Therefore, the applicant's request for a comprehensive plan amendment appears to be in harmony with the county's future land use in the area. The request was also sent out for interdepartmental review. There were quite a few notes that came back on this one. First being from County Highway Department, stating that a drainage study needs to be performed to verify the development will not increase historic flows leaving the property. Next came from the County Environmental Planning Supervisor, stating the conventional on-site wastewater treatment systems may be difficult to install in these areas due to limitations such as high percolation rates and the presence of shale, and that alternative or experimental on-site wastewater treatment systems, i.e. mound systems, may be required. Next comment came from Emergency Services 911, stating that the applicant is to provide alternate names to 911 for review and approval prior to final plat approval for the court identified as Kimberwick Court. I believe that comes, it's right here. And proposed name for Magramore Court will likely be problematic for pronunciation and spelling. The last comment from Rapid City Community Planning is that the city is currently reviewing a preliminary subdivision plan to subdivide the subject property into 23 residential lots. So in conclusion, there are several low-density residential district properties within 1 mile of the subject property. Property sizes range from 5 to 40 acres. The applicant's request to rezone appears to be in harmony with the current and future land use zoning. Therefore, staff recommends approval of rezone 1906 and comprehensive plan amendment 1906.
Any questions for staff?
I have one question.
Go ahead, Jim.
Does this border Highway 79? I can't,
No, sir.
I mean, it's,
Old
what is
Folsom
that?
This is Old Folsom Road here.
Yeah, that's to the east evidently.
Correct. And Highway
So
79 is even further east.
what's on the west? Is that just I've got this strong line along here on this map.
That's actually an easement for the railroad tracks.
Railroad tracks. Okay,
It's a right-of-way easement for railroad tracks.
okay, I see. Okay, that makes sense. All right. I was just curious about where it actually was.
Okay.
Is black heavy industrial?
Yes, ma'am.
That's on the future land use, right?
Current and future.
And what's on that land, sir, Jason?
Hi, PJ Conover, Director of Planning Department. That's Pat's Hall's property that was recently rezoned, and I don't believe they put anything out there yet, other than
Okay.
some minor land improvements.
Okay.
Any further questions for staff? And I don't have any speakers forms on this item, but if there's anybody from any member of the audience who'd like to speak out on behalf of this item, please come forward now. Seeing none, staff is recommending approval of rezone 1906 and comprehensive plan amendment, CA 1906. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Oh, second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Item 21.
Item 21 is a layout plat request to create 3 lots from one existing lot. This property was previously seen as item number 17 for a conditional use permit to allow an RV while building a single-family residence. As the property stands today, it is zoned low-density residential district, consists of 7.42 acres. Access is off of Thunderhead Falls Road. It's maintained by Pennington County Highway. There are more than 40 lots on this dead-end road. It is vacant of any structures, and special flood hazard area, including floodway, exists on this property. The proposed lots that the property owner is requesting is proposed lot D1, which would consist of 2.509 acres. Currently zone low-density residential district, but that requires a 3-acre minimum. A lot size variance or rezone would be required. There is a shared access with proposed lot D2 off of Thunderhead Falls Road. They are proposing a single-family residence on this property. There is special flood hazard area, including floodway on this property. Proposed lot D2 would consist of 2.7993 acres. It is currently zoned low-density residential district that requires a 3-acre minimum. This lot would too require a lot size variance or rezone. This shared access with lot D1 off of Thunderhead Falls Road. They are proposing a single-family residence on this property. There is special flood hazard area, including floodway on this property. And then finally, lot D3 would consist of 3.52 acres. It would meet the minimum lot size requirement for low-density residential districts. There is access off of Thunderhead Falls Road from the north side of the lot and the south side of the lot. There is an existing approach on this lot. There is special flood hazard area, including floodway, and the quote-unquote Thunderhead Falls is located on this lot. This was routed through the interdepartmental review, and there were a couple items of concern from the county environmental planning supervisor. Myself, there was concern that the number of lots are exceeded for ingress and egress on this road, and there's a significant amount of special flood hazard area in the area. And then two, from the ordinance enforcement, they do have concern with increasing density on a dead-end road that is rather narrow. As part of the analysis for this layout plan, there is one means of ingress and egress to the subject properties via Thunderhead Falls Road. There are approximately 57 lots served by Thunderhead Falls Road right now. It appears that the majority of the lots on Thunderhead Falls Road were platted in the 1960s. From planning records, it appeared the dead-end road system exceeded the 40 lots over 40 years ago. 2 properties along this road are overnight camps. Again, the Presbyterian Church Camp, which does have a conditional use permit in place, CU 9426, and the Salvation Army Camp, which is a planned unit development, PUD 0902. In the case of fire or flooding, there is no alternative escape route in this area. Thunderhead Falls Road has 7 water crossings between Highway 44 and this subject property. In the event of a flood, would take out one of those bridges. There is potential for numerous people being stranded and unable to escape to West Highway 44. The proposed plat would increase density on a dead-end road by 2 lots. Pennington County subdivision regulations, section 500.54 does not allow more than 40 lots on a dead-end road system. This increase in density would require subdivision regulations variance, but at this time, staff would not support a subdivision regulation variance due to the topography and potential fire and flooding issues along Thunderhead Falls Road. The last plat along Thunderhead Falls Road that increased density was filed July 6, 2000, prior to the effective date of our subdivision regulations. Staff is recommending denial of this layout plat, LPL 1913.
Gotcha. Any questions for staff? All right. There's a couple of members of the audience that would like to speak. We've got Shannon Vasquez.
Hello, Shannon Boston's again here for Baseline Surveying. I'm obviously the surveyor on the project, as well as been working close with ACES Engineering at Rapid here on the floodplain development, stuff like that in those areas, just so you guys know. So Jeff Shear, the owner, he is with us here today in the audience. So, but just a little background. I'm sure everybody kind of aware of the subject property is the actual Thunderhead Falls property that was owned by the Johnson family from, as far as I know, back in the 60s and used for a little tourist trap type thing, visitation to the falls and everything like that. Actually, on lot D3 on that plat, you can still see the evidence of the two buildings. One was used as a ticket booth and a restroom there. So just wanted to point those out. That and the long straightaway of that lot D is actually the underground flume where the water. If you look back up on the top where it actually has where it says water inlet, up on the top of that drawing, that's actually where the water drops into the creek, goes under the ground through the mountain, then comes out down to the south side of that map. That's how the falls are created. So that lot is based. That's actually the lot where the actual true Thunderhead Falls comes out. So, but I just wanted to point that out to you. Mr. Shear and a partner purchased the property from the Johnson's family estate. And they were looking at possibly creating the two lots, two residential homes, and leaving the Thunderhead Falls kind of that area for what it is, so that it was protected. That still, for most part, of their own, obviously, use, and then whether it would be anybody else, the public, that would be obviously up to them, where anybody else would be allowed. No commercial ventures have been discussed at this point. I mean, that's not their intent, but just to basically keep the falls to what they truly are today. So, let's see. So looking at the plat and back to the lot D3, our thought of creating a third lot was basically what would happen to that lot is be put some deed restrictions on it so that it could never be built on, so there wouldn't be, permanent residence on that home someday. So it basically just to keep that lot the way it is, just for visitation use, and you can go up there enjoyment for the owners. So now when we developed the lots of D1 and D2, looking at the property, we have three parcels in there. A lot 3B is up there by the adjoining access, which is just a tiny lot. It's the leftover lot from when Thunderhead Falls Road obviously was developed through the area. So that we're just trying to clean up the legal, absorb that into lot D2. And then if you look on the far south, we have a lot 1 of lot A. So we have another parcel there. So in our eyes, we have 2 parcels of property. We're simply wanting to adjust the lot line between the two, which would create lots D1 and D2. And this separation between lots D1 and D2, as you can see, where you're trying to utilize the most adequate building space that we have available to us due to the floodplain, due to where this is located and where the floodplain line is. So on our part, we're working closely with the owners for the placement of their home, their well, and their septic to be placed within these areas so that they meet county requirements, county separation, everything on that part. That's where that's why we're working with them on that. So, and other than that, really on my part, that's the points I wanted to kind of talk about. So, and just to get more or less to explain the reason why we have the number of lots we do in there. So,
any questions for Shannon? All right. Thank you very much, sir.
right.
Then there's a Scott Sumner. Hello, sir.
Hello, my name's Scott Sumner, and I've been involved with this. I'm an attorney. I've been involved with this transaction since Mr. Shear and who's sitting there a couple named Durant and Sharon Shearmeister have shown interest in purchasing this property. And I guess I've been representing both of them as a group, but they have somewhat distinct interests. That helps explain what Shannon just explained. They're very interested in this because of the historical significance of the Thunderhead Falls portion of the property, but they would like to. And is my understanding is that Thunderhead Falls was more or less, this is low density residential, but it was more or less grandfathered in at the time of the zoning as a commercial use property. But once the tourist attraction was no longer operational, my understanding was that grandfathering expired and this became low-density residential property. That would be the understanding that the buyers went into this transaction with. The purchase was accomplished in Mr. Shear's name. Sharon Shearmeister has a formal written option agreement to purchase a second building, a residential lot, assuming this can be replatted along the lines requested. So we have a formal agreement, and the option agreement and the agreement between Mr. Shear and Mrs. Shearmeister is just exactly as Shannon described with regard to Lot D3, where the actual Thunderhead Falls feature is located, and that is that it would not be used as a residential lot, but that it would be more or less a recreational use of that property that is owned jointly, then would be owned jointly by the owners of lots D1 and D2. So it would be something that they would use for their own enjoyment and pleasure, I guess you'd say, and their guests. So they're just trying to preserve the property and not interfere with we'll say the natural function of the waterfall in there. I disagree with the characterization that the staff has placed upon. Well, I should back up and say, with the exception of a discussion regarding the restriction on use of Lot D3, I disagree with the staff's characterization of the increased density from this proposal. If in the lower left-hand portion of the proposed lot, you have a should say it took me a long time to work through the legal descriptions. You have two placers, two mineral surveys out here that have a complex boundary between the two of them. And when the Mr. Shear purchased this property, the small parcel that's near the proposed driveway there, which is lot B of lot 8 of lot E of the Big Bend Placer 1442, that we tried for the life of us to figure out why that was there. And as best we could discern, that is a little piece of the Placer 1442 that got caught, if you will, on the north side of the road when they platted the roadway.
Scott, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. Where is that at? I'm not reading that on here.
I'm not sure
PJ,
how to
can
point to this thing.
PJ, can we give him a pointer or Brittany, so I can see exactly which one he's
Like
talking
it
about?
was just a road correction. It's right here.
Yeah,
It's not an actual
All right,
buildable
there.
lot.
Yeah, so that's just a cleanup, if you will. That used to be part of the land that's lot 3A and lot 3B below. So when lot 3A and 3B were platted, the other piece was stuck north of the road, you might say. And then, but more critically, down in the lower left-hand portion, can I use this to draw in here now? Is it ready? This little piece right here. And that's lot 1 of lot A of lot 8 of lot E of the Big Bend MS 1442. And that lot was platted by plat approved by this commission. I guess I'm in a tough time reading. I've got the plat up in front of me here. I'd have to dig through the dates. Looks like $1975. Okay, that lot was platted. And there is, however, a restriction on the plat for that lot 1 of lot A and so forth, which says the more or less no residence to be constructed on lot 1 without sewerage holding tank. Okay, so it placed a type of sewer restriction. So that we view as on behalf of the buyers or the current owner of this property and the person holding the option for a portion of this property, we view that lot 1 of lot A of lot 8 of lot E of the Big Bend 1442 placer to be a buildable lot, albeit with a restriction on use of a holding tank. Then we have the larger property, which is lot D of lot 17, which is the bigger Thunderhead Falls property. Okay, and what we envision that, and that since that is no longer commercial, it becomes a residential. So you have two buildable lots, if you will, within the proposed area for this replat. The smaller lot to the lower left, it's circled there, lot 1 of lot A, and the larger lot D of lot 17. And what the owners would like to do is to move the dividing line between those two lots to the proposed location adjacent to the driveways that Shannon pointed out to you there, so that the smaller lot becomes more attractive, and the other lot to the east remains usable. Critical though, and I'm not sure how the county would make sure to enforce this, critical to this plan is that lot D3 will not be used as a residential lot. That's the intention of the owners. That's express provision in the option agreement between Mr. Shear and Mrs. Shearmeister, and certainly the intention of the parties. And, so people argue, we go back and forth a little bit about how to effectuate that. But a deed restriction has been mentioned. That would be the initial plan, that when this is platted, the lot D3 would have a deed restriction placed on it, and Mr. Shear would then deed lot D3 to himself and Mrs. Shearmeister, right, with that restriction.
Yep, just a common area for the two lots.
Yep, so it'd be a common recreational lot, if you will, for the two, which makes this a very unusual property, I suppose. But if I understand the concern of the staff as to why they're recommending against approval, that is to do with the density issue. And our view as the buyer, Mr. Shear and Mrs. Shearmeister, is that we're not increasing the density because you've already got 2 buildable lots, and when we're done, there'll still be 2 buildable lots. In terms of the safety, there's, lot D1 is probably a little safer lot for flood than the small lot 1 of lot A in the corner there. But the impact on the number of buildable lots is unchanged. And as to Ms. Hadcock's concern, those are real concerns, but these lots are long ago platted, and you would caution the planning commission against restricting the use in such a way that people can't build anything on these properties, which would be the result if, at least they can't build, you're restricting the use of the land beyond what the current restrictions are if you say no to this request. Be our position. I think that addresses the things that I intended to speak to.
Any questions for Scott? Go ahead, Jim.
I'm kind of lost here, Scott.
Sure.
Lot D of lot 17, this big lot D2, I guess it's called.
Well, lot D of lot 17 is the original lot, one of the 2, I guess we'll say.
Okay, but is that a buildable lot? It's in the floodway and everything?
You're talking about lot D2 or the original lot D?
Well, the one, I guess I'm talking about, well, I'm not sure which is, I see, it must be lot D2, which is the one right in the middle, the great big one in the middle.
Okay.
Okay, is that a buildable lot? Is that a lot, or is it real steep terrain? I have no idea what it is.
If you look at this property, you saw the dirt work earlier with the RV?
Oh, yes.
That's that lot right there.
Oh, okay.
I mean, and what it is that it's a flat to gently sloping ground from Thunderhead Falls down toward the creek.
Okay.
And then when you cross the creek, you have some flat land and it's narrow to the left on this map, and which would be the west, and wider to the east a little bit. But you've got where the U.S. public domain is there, you've got a cliff.
Oh,
okay. So this property faces a cliff. Wouldn't you think that's fair characterization?
That's why I said it.
And then the small connecting line that goes between the north portion of Old Lot D, or the north portion of D3 and the south portion of D3, that's up and over the hill. So the north portion is on creek level, the south portion is on creek level, and the connector between them is up and over a hill.
Oh, okay.
Somebody want to see this? Or?
Do you have any pictures of these lots? Anybody take any pictures besides just, that might help?
Brittany, do you have
seeing
some?
of that? Thank you.
I've got a photo of the property that shows the treat area all being well out of the 500-year floodplain. If you guys can all see it,
I think she's going to bring it up on the big screen for us all.
Yeah.
You should, Greg, come over here and introduce yourself, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm Jeff Scherer, and
I said Greg,
I heard Greg and Jeff.
well, there's another Shear.
Yep.
Sorry, I just wanted to just clarify something, make a couple comments. When this was routed around, that lot 1 of lot A was actually not listed in the routing. That's why it's confusing to you. But just for a point of clarification from staff, right now as the property stands, it's essentially grandfathered. If they were to reconfigure any of these lot lines, our subdivision regulation variances kick in, and it still doesn't meet our subdivision regulation requirements, irregardless of when the prior stuff was platted. So they could still utilize the 2 lots that they have existing right now as they stand. Once they go into the replatting, then our subdivision regulations apply.
Even though it's just moving the interior lot line?
Yes, it is.
May I ask, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
Brittany, could I just ask a follow-on, please? So they don't follow the subdivision regulations because of the lots, the proposed lot size? Is that it?
Because it's greater than 40 lots. That's part of our subdivision regulations, because there's 57 lots. So if they were to keep it just as it is right now, and they wanted to utilize that lot 1 of lot A, they could get a building permit for lot 1 of lot A, and then the lot D of lot 17. If they go through the reconfiguration of lot lines, our subdivision regulations are in place, so they would have to meet our subdivision regulations, and it doesn't meet the 40.
I see.
Does that make sense? Okay.
And would they have, sorry.
Go ahead.
Chairman,
Okay.
Would they have the setbacks and everything to even build the houses at that point from a floodway line and what was happening
I don't
on
know
that?
if they would on lot 1 of lot A. I haven't looked at
That's
that one enough to see where the floodplain is on those.
my concern too, is that they probably are gonna be asking for variances in order to build some of the stuff on these lots.
On the lot 1 of lot A, that's possible. That's probably why there was a deed restriction on there to allow only holding tanks, because there wasn't room.
Yes, and then if you look at D2, floodway and floodplain is about 3/4 of that. You got about 1/4 of that land that's not in the floodway or floodplain. Floodplain you could build with a foot elevation,
Yeah.
making it higher, but floodway. Mr. Shear, what, are you building your house on, are you wanting to build your house on lot D1 or D2?
I'm on the right one as you're looking at it.
He wants to build on D2 and Mrs. Schiermeister wants to build on D1.
Please come over. Yeah.
Want me to circle it where?
Yeah.
That'd be fine.
Where it cleared the area for the house?
That'd be fine.
Yeah.
That's kind of the area right there that I disrupted with the fire.
That's you, and then, so you're in D2 and she's in D1?
Oops.
You have proposed houses on these lots. Oops.
I did something.
Brittany?
Hey, Brittany or PJ.
So what are they trying to?
He was trying to circle.
Just the regular, we have it on here, but it has 2 different proposed house. And so it must be Shearmeister and Shear. Shear is on D, you're on D2, sir?
Where I'd like to build, yes.
And D1 is Shearmeister.
Is that proposed home in D1? Is that in that floodplain or? I mean, it looks like was it just right outside of it? Is that what I'm understanding with this?
D1 is right by the floodplain, but it's not, doesn't look
Yeah,
like
I think
it's
I can touch on that one. Right.
So it just skirts it.
That's actually push too many.
I think he hit discard last time. There you go.
But that one is, I mean, to answer your question, the home and on both D1 and D2 are.
And these are primary residences, or are they just gonna be cabins?
What?
Are they primary residences, or are they gonna be cabins?
Well, no, it's gonna be like a primary residence, but I've got 2 children that are possibly, maybe someday moving here.
Okay.
They're in college now.
So at this point, basically, it's just gonna be a second residence?
Just gonna be a vacation home type.
Okay.
As well as Shoemeisters. Theirs is.
They both wanna do
specifically a
vacation.
vacation home. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair, I don't necessarily have a question, but it appears to me, based on the sketching for the floodplain and the floodway, that there's virtually no buildable land in lot 1 of lot A. Am I correct in seeing that?
I think you're pretty close to that.
And I think that if you go back to the aerial photo that you had that had those markings on it, I mean, there's like a little tiny
little lip,
the little tiny corner.
There's right there.
So that.
Yep, that little.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
just have a quick question. And that is, sir, you had indicated that part of it would be a common area for the enjoyment of the residents.
Yes, that would be lot D3. The
Okay,
actual
but
falls.
I just wanted to be sure it was not going to be used for tourist attraction, money-making entity, or anything like that. It would only be used by the contiguous landowners. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct. I think Jeff can answer you.
It couldn't be built on because of the low elevation.
And you guys don't have any plans of doing a commercial
No.
venture or anything there?
Okay, I just wanted to be
Okay,
certain.
yep.
Seemed an unusual request.
I'd like
Go ahead,
to
Kathy.
ask the surveyor a question. So is it at all possible to change these proposed lot lines slightly so that at a minimum you could meet the 3 acre sizing for,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I mean, a move over between lot D2 and D3 enough, and then maybe angle that other lot line enough so that you can at least create 3 acre parcels?
Right, and we did look at that, and we could deal that. The line in between the two is pretty sensitive for the two building spots to have a good separation and get everybody, both parties, the areas they want. I mean, I could mess with the lot lines. It's gonna not look, take a little sliver across the creek, or it's not gonna look the best, but I could definitely meet the acreage requirement to accomplish that. But in my eyes, I just try to make the best layout, even if we're asking for a variance on that part, rather than create a really goofy, kind of like the shape of lot you're looking at.
Right, yeah.
Rather than, we can do that. I mean, I could come up with those acreages to meet those requirements, but.
All right, any further questions? Come to the microphone, please.
I was just,
State your name again.
looking at the.
State your name again, just so we know who we're
Jeff,
talking to.
Jeff Scher. And I was just, I don't know if it would work or not, but I would like to see the whole floodplain area turned into like a common area. And maybe that can be done legally later, and then just 2 building sites of smaller size even. Just, above the 500-year. If that's an option, that would work. And that way that whole lot D3 would be all of the floodplain, basically, if that would work. Something like that,
Chairman.
If we could get the variance on a smaller lot size, I guess, just enough to accommodate our homes and, a little yard area and stuff, but.
Gotcha. Deb, go ahead.
Mr. Scheer, you seem like a very nice man, and usually I try to find solution for people. But it seems that you're gonna put some vacation home rentals on here is what I'm listening until your family comes. It sounds like Mrs. Scheermeister is gonna do the same.
I'm hard of hearing.
Sorry, sir. I thought, you can't hear me? You're the first one I've ever heard that. Just kidding. You're a very nice man, sir, but for me, I can't see increasing the density, let alone using it for commercial use. If it was your primary residence, I mean, I'd go out there and look and see where we could find some solution in it. But at this point, it seems more like they're going to be not primary residents at this point. They're going to be secondary. So plus I'll keep saying it, that area for emergency services and fire and flooding. Right now, I believe if something happened in that area, and I did take fire administrator out on another lot and also in the Salvation Army camp that has been there a long time, and he said that's a lot of people to try to get out of there and have it safe. So for me, most of the time you'll find, in fact, 99% of the time, I will go with the landowner and try to find solution. But in this case, for one access surrounded by creeks, sir, for me, it's hard for me to move that way. But I'm one of.
I know the church camp there right next.
Speak in the mic, please.
The church camp next to us, I talked with Jason Wright. He's the operates that
Yes, sir.
Rimrock Church, and I know he's talking about, and I'm not sure if anybody from the county's heard about it, but about maybe another access into Hysiga through the church camp, and he was talking about them giving an easement to allow that sometime in the near future, but I'm not sure where or who.
And
all
for-
heard about it, but
And Mr. Shear, if you did that, I think you, for most of those residents, or all those residents, plus anybody wanting to build, that'd be a huge difference for people not having as many concerns, and I think the staff as well, so. Thank you, sir.
I have a question about that small little lot one of lot A. Can you blow up a picture of that a little bit better? Just out of curiosity, I want to see that corner spot that you've circled out. I mean, if I understand correctly, it's a buildable lot, but is there even space to build?
I can get rapid map up.
On the far right of the screen, there's a little.
.36 acres.
0.36 acres, and with that overlay for the floodplain. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you said there was 57 spots out there? Is that correct? 57 lots? Okay. I just wanted to get a better idea. So that's considered a buildable lot, even though that's got that amount. And I'm just asking, that's why I was looking at it, and I was like, all right, that's just a little bit of space there. Okay. Any further questions for staff, or current recommendation is to deny layout plat 19-13. Is there a motion?
Motion to deny.
Second the motion.
Motion and second. Any further discussion on this item?
May I hear the motion again? Sorry.
The motion is to deny. Motion, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no.
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 Ooh, let's do a roll call vote on that one. Jerry?
Deb?
No.
Rich?
Time out. It was aye for the denial
Oh, aye.
and no for the
Aye.
correct?
Aye for denial.
Aye for the denial.
Thank you, Rich.
Aye for the denial.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No.
Aye.
Okay, it passes. It was denied. 5-2. I just didn't hear everybody quite clear, so thank you. All right, that takes us to item number 22.
Hi, Christina Proetti again from Planning. Item number 22 is layout plat 1914. The applicants are not in the audience today, but it's Patricia Reinhardt and Darlene Litzel. They are requesting to reconfigure the lot lines separating each of their properties so that the well that they currently share, will be transferred from Patricia's property to Darlene's property. Let me get that on. So that image up there shows the proposed lot line configuration. And then it's hard to see, but the red X'd out would be the removal of the existing lot line. The existing lots are currently zoned as limited agriculture district, with both lots 1 and 2 consisting of 4 acres individually. Lot 1 contains 1 single-family residence. Lot 2 contains 1 single-family residence and 1 metal shop. This proposal doesn't substantially change the area of either of the lots or the land use. The land use will remain the same as residential. It's just that they would like to switch the water well from one lot to the other. They are sisters. So there are no other items of concern for this property, and staff is recommending approval with 6 conditions.
Any questions for staff? Go ahead, Jim.
Just out of curiosity, why do they want to switch the well from one property to the other?
Well, Mrs. Reinhardt has terminal cancer, and they are sisters, and they want to make sure that that well stays in the family.
Oh, I see, okay.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. That takes us to item number 23, unless we'd like to take a quick recess for any parking or a quick break.
I'm going to take a recess. So,
All right.
you know,
I move that we
you can
recess.
probably continue without me, but.
5 minutes.
I move that we recess until 10:55.
Second.
I would like 10 minutes.
10 minutes? So
Yeah, I
then,
mean, sometimes you give us 6, and that's just not enough time for me.
okay, so 11 o'clock. We'll recess until 11 o'clock. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. We'll reconvene at 11 o'clock. All right, we're 11 o'clock. I need a motion so we can adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. It takes us to item number 23. PJ.
PJ Conover, Director, Planning Department. Item 23 is proposed TIF District Number 4. Applicants and the agents are in the audience today if you have any questions. Just a little bit of quick history on my part. On May 16, 2019, a project plan was sent to our office from BKE Consulting. Blaze Emerson is the agent on behalf of the city of Box Elder. In that proposal, or that request, was the development of Seeger Crossings Business Park and a community event center, including street, water, and sewer utilities, drainage improvements, and other infrastructure elements that would serve the purposes of other future commercial and industrial districts. The developer of the project is B1 Development Incorporated. Shortly after this, Mr. Emerson with BKE Consulting took a position with the city of Box Elder, and the agent then became Tobin Morris, and so he was here to speak on behalf of the applicants and developer today. With that, the boundaries of the proposed TIF district are located entirely inside the limits of the city limits of Box Elder. So Pennington County is kind of acting as the factor to help bring this forward on their behalf, because Box Elder is unable to carry any additional TIFs because of state law. They would increase the 10% maximum that they're allowed. And so with that, they approved a resolution allowing Pennington County to move forward on their behalf with this TIF. This notice was also this notice of hearing before the Planning Commission was sent out in accordance with South Dakota Codified Law 11-9-3. It was noticed in Rapid City Journal on May 31st, Pennington County Current on May 30th, and also in the Hill City Prevailer on May 29th. Also, the copies of the hearing letters were also sent to all chief executive officers of each local government entity having the power to levy taxes on property executive officer taxes on the property located within the proposed district. This was also routed through the interdepartmental review. No items of concern came back. As you can see in the memo, the state's attorney did submit quite a bit of information, and specifically in there is item number 1, where it mentions that if the Planning Commission determines that the TIF district is needed, under South Dakota Codified Law Section 11-9-4, the Planning Commission must, and then there's 3 additional areas there, and then some more comments going down. But most of the comments from the State's Attorney's Office will deal with the Board of Commissioners, but it's just letting the Planning Commission what needs, so you know what's going on forward. With that, when we get to the point, staff and state's attorney are recommending 4 separate motions by the planning commission. And I know you guys are gonna have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna leave the podium at this time so you can ask them.
All right. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Jim.
I have a question. My understanding, I don't know anything about these TIFs. It always seemed an enigma to me. I just, always confusing. But I noticed that evidently South Dakota law requires that this be a blighted or economic distressed area. Now, I noticed on page 7, they define many of the terms. One of them is blighted or economic development. I can't see where they define blighted there at all. It just says economic development. And so I'm curious about number one, what is a blighted area? Is this a blighted area? And is the eventual passage of something like this in some way constrained by demonstrating that this is a blighted area?
And it's a very good question, and I would leave that answer up to their agent.
It says blighted or economic development, so you can use it for either. It's
So
either or.
South Dakota says it doesn't have to be a blighted area. It can be an unblighted area.
If I'm correct, and Toby can,
Would seem odd to have both of those things in there.
the city uses the blighted a lot more, Rapid City does. But I think the state, if I'm correct, is more blighted or economic development. Am I correct?
You got him?
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. Yes, you are correct, Commissioner Hadcock. Under STCL 11-9-8, subsection 1, it either needs to be a blighted area or not less than 50% by area of the real property within that area will stimulate and develop general economic welfare and prosperity for the state.
So it has to be a blighted area, or it has to be an area that is not so well developed that it can't develop more. Is that the idea?
That not less than 50% by area of the real property within the district the development of that area will stimulate general economic.
So it has to be an underdeveloped area in part of it, right? Because you have to have room for this expansion and valuation and so forth. Is that the idea?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Toby,
So this
can you
is
answer
not a blighted area. Is that right?
The finding, the proposal under the project is not that it's blighted, just that the development of this area will by 50% enhance the general economic advancement of the area, correct?
Okay. So why wouldn't one simply use a conventional method of financing and developing this? Why would one need a TIF?
You probably
ahead.
want to ask Toby.
Yeah.
Toby, can you actually
I was gonna say, come on up.
start from the beginning a little bit so then we understand the whole part? I'm only saying this because I have to disclose, we have been meeting with this group with the auditor, me and Ron Rosknecht to have an understanding and then moving this through to Box Elder and asking them for a resolution. So bottom line is I've been involved with this from the beginning. Also, I have been in the city a lot of times when I did tips for me, it was about the infrastructure. When we were doing infrastructure to help the whole area that we're in. So in this case, bottom line is we've been meeting with these developers and our staff, me and Ron Rosknecht, to make sure that it covers the state rules is where the county has to follow. Rapid City has a whole set of different rules that they use that the state doesn't. And Toby can, if you would, explain the difference between maybe those rules, if you would, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Toby Morris with Doherty and Company, working on the behalf of the developer, the city, in terms of the tax increment plan. Quick background, I've probably worked on 40, 50 of these, and as many as that you find, hardly any two are ever the same. It's when you talk about economic development in the state, What Box Elder defines economic development is going to be much different than what Faith is. Faith would probably say veterinarian is most important to them. So you're going to find terms in here that are meant to be very broad. When you look at our TIF law, it resembles a lot of Illinois' TIF law. And for a long time, we had faced that question of blighted. Rather, what we did then in 2012 is we changed the law to say, let's call a spade here. It's economic development. The reason why it's not to exceed 50% is we don't want a 500-mile wide TIF to do roads throughout the county, but rather we have to keep it precise within that area. In the past, when the word blighted has come up, we take a lot of offense to that word in South Dakota. I mean, there was times previous we were blighting a cornfield for the fact it lacked infrastructure. Now what we're saying in its economic development. And if I can speak a little bit to the whole of this plan, what you're really finding here is a true public-private partnership. You have the city of Box Elder that for the past year we've been putting together a lot of the information, a lot of the plans to create an event center, something that can host more sporting events, something that can host meeting centers. A lot of it that we feel anticipation of what Ellsworth is going to do for the next couple of years. But with that comes the infrastructure costs. And a lot of times if it's an event center, in this case owned by the city of Box Elder, the owner is responsible for those infrastructure costs. Here what we did is we created a public-private partnership where we put a TIF in the area, and the B1 development folks said, hey, if we can get help with our infrastructure over here, we'll offset the city's infrastructure over there and take the full risk on that. If there's one thing I can really point out in this plan is the county is a conduit. So there is no liability on the county side other than to pass on that revenue. We typically would have done this through the city, but because of the 10% rule, it rules the city out. I will also say you're not the first county to do this. This is very common. We worked on one in Gerald County for Alpena and the Jack Links. We get over to Lincoln and you get towns like Harrisburg that are growing faster than anything. The county acts as a big brother conduit partner in the whole entire process with it. And once again, I'll stress, no liability on the county side with that. So what we did in this plan is we went through and we tried to quantify through engineers' estimates of what was the infrastructure related to the event center, what's the infrastructure related to the commercial business park that's going to be developed around with that. When you talk about the financing plan, one thing that we've set up in this is, and working with the auditor, is it's essentially a dollar in, a dollar out. So we're not capitalizing a bunch of interest. We're saying, hey, if these projections come true, then the developer will be able to recoup their costs. If they don't come true, that's the developer's issue, and it's not the county's issue, and it's not the city's issue. What we know we're going to get with the city is we're going to get infrastructure that's needed in place so we can continue to work on the event center financing as a whole. I probably am speaking around a couple different things, Mr. Chairman. If there's something specific you'd like me to walk through, I can gladly do that. I mean, your role as planning and zoning, it's interesting because we get our best ideas by copying law, which we did in this case from Chicago. Is the planning and zoning is to look at it and say, is it zoned correctly? And in here, yes, we have the master plan from the city that shows how it is laid out. Is it contiguous? Yes, it's contiguous. And does it meet the 10% rule? And the answer to all that is yes, working with the state's attorney in the resolutions, it conforms to South Dakota law. But the other thing that's important though too, because it's another set of eyes and ears on a TIF plan, and it is tax dollars, is does it pass the smell test? And, you know, that's where I think when you look at what numbers are in there, you're not seeing developers' fees. You're not seeing $8 million worth of capitalized interest. Rather, it's concise. It says this is the amount that will be approved for. If, like I said, there's no liability associated with the county. And here you go, developer. We hope everything comes together really quickly for you. But if not, you know, that becomes your issue, not the counties or the cities.
I would say my big question is, where does it say the county is not liable? I mean, I look at this and I read the resolution and I don't see, can you walk me through that?
In the plan,
Page 22, page.
That's why you do that.
Okay.
And while they're looking for it, planning commissioners, the most up-to-date plan is in your binder. It was changed shortly after it was emailed to you.
Yep.
So
I
look at
realize
that.
on page 13 is where it talks about the obligation.
Yep.
In the plan. I guess maybe my question is, there's contracts that are gonna be signed and there's resolution, but how do we, when it moves forward, well, you didn't sign a contract that says it's not liable to the county. You get what I'm saying?
Correct. And in there, what'll happen is the true binding document comes forth as the developer's agreement, where the county commission will enter an agreement with the city as their role is to pass on all increment. In there, that'll also state, per here, that the county is not obligated, should there be a shortfall, should whatever it may be, but rather it's a dollar for dollar in and out. And then it will be the developer who takes on any debt from that. And so if there is a shortfall, if they pledge their family, whatever it may be on the collateral basis, it'll be between the developer and their bank. You can assign the developer agreement, essentially saying then once the money goes from the county to the city will assign that increment to the bank, but never at any time will there be a direct contract on the infrastructure between a government entity and a contractor. And only then does that create the liability. Because you're probably thinking typically we issue TIF bonds, and that's the way of the past. As a company who works a lot for the government, including your county, of all the TIFs I've done, I've never had the city or the county be a direct borrower. So we remove that. Rather, you're just a conduit to pass on those proceeds.
Okay. Any other questions?
Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
Toby, tell them why on this, on this TIF, and it's why also that I think it's one of the better TIFs that I have agreed to, and you guys know I was in the city agreeing to a lot of TIFs at the time. Tell us about the interest costs and why this is different.
The interest costs on this, for the most part, let's just say, are pre-calculated in. We have fluctuating interest rates right now. Feds are talking about lowering. Commercial rates are in that 6-7%. We don't have capitalized interest in this because it is a TIF on top of a TIF. Those proceeds of those first two TIFs and this one go to the original debt. So to prevent what I call an open-ended annuity, we've already calculated in here that roughly the project cost of about $7 million, if you were to look at it really over 18 years at 5%, would be about that, was it $4.5 million? So we round up, we said, look, this total TIF is worth 11.5. If rates hit like the early 80s and they go to 20%, that's a developer problem. At the same time, as more of this revenue is built and comes in and pays that down, the sooner it comes off the books.
And we also, and the developer agreed to pay the interest costs up front.
The developer will incur the interest costs, yes.
Okay.
So
ahead, Jim.
I'll go back to this question. So why isn't every single development project a TIF? If there are so many inherent advantages, which you've outlined, it seems like, why isn't, and if one only needs to use the mechanism of a conduit in this case, why isn't every single one of these projects, or maybe they are, I could be wrong, but maybe they are, but is there a reason that they're not, or can you kind of explain that a little bit?
I think it really goes again to what I state about the smell test. So in this case, you're having a developer put close of $3 million of their own capital into an event center that's going to be owned by the city. So that's an upfront of $3 million expenditure on that. If this was just a straight housing TIF, which I get approached a lot on, and say they want to do $300,000-$400,000 homes, no, it doesn't pass the smell test. Is it for workforce housing where they're going to reduce their price? Yes, that is one of the allowable ways to do a TIF. It really comes back to on a local control side and says, here we have a partnership between a city and a developer. If it was going to, I mean, there's examples I get approached all the time that say if it's land right next to the city limits and if the city's going to grow into it, does it need a TIF? Well, what are the benefits? What are the but for? In this case, we can say if it were not for but for the infrastructure for the event center, we wouldn't probably have an event center. And in return on that, we're having a broader area that also develops out the business park, which is really going to be the increment, the catalyst that's going to pay back the TIF as a whole. And so there's more scrutiny on them now, as there should be. I work hand in hand with the governor's office to develop more guidelines, policies through the Department of Revenue so that there's not abuses out there.
It does seem like that area is developed in a way that would hardly need any nudge. You know, I mean, there's lots of development out there that is attractive, and I assume some infrastructure has been put in that would be easy to extend. And that's why I guess I was so thrown by the notion of a blighted area, which I thought, where's the blight here? I mean, why would we make an effort to provide what is, I assume, a subsidy? And that was my other question. Where is the subsidy here? If there's no cost, virtually, to the county, et cetera, where is the subsidy that's being extended? Or is it simply a matter of, is it a legalistic, detail that we're talking about?
I think if you look at it as infrastructure is our biggest impediment to development. Here we're sitting at 7 million worth of infrastructure. The regulatory environment from banks is becoming much more stringent in terms of how much cash, how much equity is able to go into that. We also look at here, we're close to 3 million of infrastructure that would typically maybe have to come off the city's balance sheet. Here we're putting it onto the developer's balance sheet, onto the risk with them. And if the developers, let's just say, fail, the city still has that infrastructure in place. And once that infrastructure is in place, we know development will happen. Maybe it's from the second developer, the third developer, but at least at that time, we have that infrastructure in place. As far as no cost to the county, like I said, it's a tool. It's one of our few economic development tools we have in the state. I used to work at GOED, and I'd love to go to other states and say, hey, I have no corporate income tax, this, and this. And they would say, well, I just went to Iowa, and they'd hand me $1 million. And I said, well, I don't tax it. But then they would say, I can get $1 million. Well, that's the only thing we really have in this state is a tax increment financing district for economic development.
Well, a couple of things. The west side of that road is city. The east side is Box Elder. The west side of that road's been up for sale for a long time. The east side of that road, the bottom line, I believe why I did this and moved forward with this was it wasn't about Pennington County. If it was, it would take the property taxes and defer them. We have the B-21 coming out there and some other entities that are, we believe, or I believe that tax, that sales tax from the event center, from this courtyard that they're building, and some other entities that they said they're bringing in on this Secret Drive that's going to be extended, is huge for Box Elder. So in this case, it's not all about us. We did this for Box Elder. Me and Ross Connect move forward with this for that reason, because can you see the vision and can you see what that would do for Box Elder and the surrounding areas? They do not have a 632 room convention center in Rapid City to hold anything. Can you imagine if that's full? What's that going to do for Box Elder? So if we're looking at economic development, that is huge. That is huge for what that's going to do for that surrounding area in Box Elder. That's why I said, show me the TIF after that. And looking at what the infrastructure does, that's huge. If you could, Mall Drive's going to be extended. Cedar Drive will be extended. You'll have sewer and water. You'll have a convention center, event center that's going to help Box Elder. That's going to be huge, and a courtyard that can handle not only Box Elder's conventions but Rapid City and the surrounding areas. That's a huge vision. That's a huge vision to take on for $7 million and get a break. I'm willing to do a break for somebody that wants to risk that much. That's what I see for economic impact, and I think you have other entities in here that have written the same letters. See the vision, see the issues. We did this before, and people said on Cabela's, you gave them $2 million. They can afford their $2 million, right? But people forgot on the backside, if they look what that TIF gave us, that gave us a 16-inch line, a 12-inch line, and a new reservoir. That reservoir cost us 1.2 if we'd have built it ourselves. How much would that infrastructure, that sewer and water, cost us? So we put that in an increment, and we didn't get the property taxes, or people didn't get the property taxes, but look what that generated now. What is the land around there worth? So I believe once they build this Seeger and Mall Drive out, there's land all around there that can be taxed and will be taxed to add to our property values. So again, the vision for me was all of that put into one, let alone the city would benefit later because they could probably connect to sewer and water or add other areas on that west side. So we're not only thinking about Box Elder, we're looking at Rapid City. So to me, it's the whole vision that this would create and what that adds to the economic impact, not just through giving them, as we say, some money, but it's a public-private partnership that I think is going to be amazing once we see what that happens.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Sandy.
You know, I admire the vision that the developers have, and I'm 100% in favor of this. In particular, after reading all of the letters of support in here, you know, so I have no problem and no issue with granting approval of this.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I have one question, but it really involves more of the project rather than the TIF itself. And maybe somebody from Box Elder could address this. And that is that, you know, one of the big concerns out there that's been, growing for some time is the fact that it's a one-way in, one-way out road for all the hotels. And now with the, with the idea of the event centers even going to put more pressure on that. And I know there's been some talk over the last several years about trying to create another access out so that there's, two-way street. But it just seems to me that this event center is, it just really getting to be kind of a critical situation to have those, the two access points. And I'm just wondering what the progress is on that.
So, good morning, Blaze Emerson with City of Box Elder. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director just recently. The city is working on really two aspects to that for second access out of that area. The first one is one that's a little bit closer to the hotel area, which is the extension of the Geese to Cheyenne Boulevard. That will come through the University Center property, and we're working with them, with the City of Rapid City, South Dakota Department of Transportation, and Box Elder to try to get that one through. Also, the city is working with the developer of the Northern Lights development to potentially get another access that would be roughly, whoops, I guess. Okay. A little bit further to the east, there's kind of an extension going over, and there is working with a potential way of looking at how to get that financed also to there. So there's really two options there, and potentially both of them could come through. Some of these take a little bit of time, working with a railroad, and not always railroads aren't always the most easy entity to always get all these agreements to come through, but it is known that is needed, and so I think both of those are being pursued, and I know particularly the Geese, the Department of Transportation is working hard. The South Dakota Department of Transportation is really working on that one to make sure that one goes through. So
Okay, but is it kind of a prerequisite that second access get built before the event center?
I think it's probably going to be more kind of in conjunction there. And quite honestly, I've only been with the city for 3 weeks, so I haven't been part of those earlier discussions, but I know it's a very high priority to get that through.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I have one. So this is tip number 4, and maybe you can speak to it. It means there was 3 others. What are the status of those other 3?
I think 2006 was when that last one was dissolved.
They're all dissolved, and were they dissolved early? Did they recoup all the finances early? I mean, how do they play out?
You know, I didn't work on them. I could research that through Department of Revenue.
I'm just interested if anybody knows.
I'm Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I know they've been dissolved. I can't tell you whether they were paid off early. I certainly can obtain that information if you'd like.
Okay. I was just asking to see if there was someone new right away. Go ahead, Kathy.
I can speak to TIF number one because that was a TIF that my husband was involved with and it had to do with drainage. And it was paid off, I think, in like 8 years. And we had, state law gives you 20, and I think that was paid off in 8. That was in the early 90s, mid 90s.
Okay.
And I can speak to TIF number 3. You had a question earlier about county liability. The language disclaiming any liability by the county will be included in the developer agreement. That's fairly standard.
Okay. All right. Any further questions?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Rich.
So the county doesn't currently have any of these in place, but what burden does the accounting for all of the tax dollars and the in and out, so to say, of the dollars, what burden does that put on the county staff? I'm not sure who best to address that.
There looks like.
Do we have some administration costs in this that are given to us for the auditor and others that have to?
Correct.
And what
yes.
is that amount?
I believe we agreed at 10,000.
Okay, just so they knew that up front.
Good morning, Cindy Moeller, Pennington County Auditor. We will add it into all of our other apportioning duties. So it will be something that we'll deal with as that money comes in to get it in and out on a monthly basis. The $10,000 is something that we figured was be a good amount to attach to this project for that.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Rich?
It does. So there was an estimate of time by staff, by cost, according with that, the additional workload burden, that kind of, and an estimate of $10,000 was put on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. My second question is, so the TIF will incorporate $2 million worth of infrastructure for the streets, utilities, and drainage for the event center. What other what are the other entities? How does the breakout of the rest of the 16 million go for the event center? And I'm looking at this summary here on page 14.
The event center total project cost is about 19 million at this time. So we've just apportioned really what was in on the infrastructure. The financing of the event center has yet to be completed. We're still working on that at this time, but then that will fall under the city side and for the construction and administration of that.
And you said that the developer is going to put 3 million in to the event center?
Of infrastructure's worth, yes.
Okay. And then the city will cover the rest of that?
Yes, we're working on a very interesting, complex financing, trying to develop something on that between the agreements. Obviously, when you build a $16 million event center, it doesn't necessarily have a appraised value of that. So we're working with USDA on some guarantee loans there.
That answer all your questions, Rich?
And if I heard you right, you're estimating an 18-year payback at 5%?
Correct.
Okay. And is that a conservative estimate?
I'd say it's very conservative in terms of what the total TIF amount is. Because there's capitalized interest, with the TIF, you could work on either side of it. It just depends on the numbers. So I could have shown capitalized interest at another, say, 4 or 5 million. We could have probably put a TIF up to 14, 16 million. But it was really breaking it down. And what I broke it down to is say, look, the current TIFs that are in place have generated about 35 million of increment value. So let's just use that then of what would it take and bring the number back. And when you look at it from a revenue side, in this plan, you'll see that based on that revenue is going to generate roughly right about, say, 12 million over the next 18 years. So that's where we broke into the interest rate and said the interest was going to be this. We're capping this at 11.5 million. So if B1 development gets a late start, they don't do something for the next couple of years, that candle essentially burns at both ends. They'll never get more than this 11.5 million. It simplifies it for the auditor in a lot of ways because If increment comes in at 100,000 next year, then for the auditor only needs to pass on 11.4 million. We don't have to, worry about what day, what accrued interest, verification with banks, things like that.
And the estimated build out for the infrastructure will be complete by 2025?
If not much sooner. The estimated build out is going to probably be 2022.
I'm just looking at your payback schedule here. So 2025 is valuation year, 2026 would be the revenue year. And then beyond that, there's basically the same valuation for the rest of the plan.
We're assuming on that right away with the Marriott coming in, that'll have a valuation of 12 million. And then these are just what it's going to take for 5 million for the next couple of years. Now, remember, if that 5 million slides down, that 12 million down there on the right dramatically goes down as well because it's a compounding of revenue.
Right. Okay.
Does that answer all your questions?
Yes, sir.
Any further questions? I have one. What happens if Box Elders doesn't secure the funding to build a convention center?
The infrastructure will still be in place because that'll be a condition of the TIF. So eventually something's going to happen there. We're getting closer, but that is a very good concern. But ultimately, we know once infrastructure goes in, something's going to happen. It's just a matter of if or when at that point. So that's the risk the developer is taking on and will put in place to get that in.
So the developer's taking all that risk, and if something falls through for Box Elder and they don't do it, there's not an obligation for Box Elder to do anything back for the developer or anything of that nature?
Nope.
Okay. Any further questions?
You can see we pushed a lot of liability onto the developer on this.
Well, fair enough. I just
They're
things
not
come to mind.
smiling either back there anymore. Okay.
Any further questions? All right. So then before us, we have 4 proposed motions here. I'd entertain, if y'all have them in front of you, turn on page 404 at the beginning of the, I kind of pulled mine out of the track there at the very beginning.
What page, where is it?
It's at the very beginning of before you get to the, it's page 404 is all 4 of the motions so that we can all see them.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, PJ.
A little extra explanation. The first 3 motions are requirements out of SDCL 1194, and the last item, last motion, number 4, is out of South Dakota Codified Law 11913. So if we can take them each individually, because they all do something different.
So we have to take them each individual.
Yes,
So
please.
we have to have 4 separate individual motions. All right.
I move to accept motion number 1 to recommend the creation of the tax increment financing district. Number
Second.
4.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. The second motion that is proposed is to adopt the project plan for the creation of TIF District Number 4 dated June 2019.
So moved.
I second.
Motion and seconded by Deb Hadcock. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Third motion is to designate the boundaries of TIF District Number 4 as legally described in the adopted project plan.
I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. And last item, a motion to submit the project plan and recommendation of the Pennington County Planning Commission to create tax increment financing district number 4, County of Pennington, to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners for further action.
I so move.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. That takes us now to item number 24.
Item 24 is ordinance amendment 1901 for Pennington County to consider the amendment adoption of the comprehensive plan. Basically, what we're doing right now is the planning commission has held at least 7 public hearings on the comprehensive plan current version. You met your goal fairly well of wanting to do 3 chapters per meeting, but sometimes you had to backtrack depending on who was here to discuss certain items. The changes have been submitted to Matrix, and they are working on them. The earliest possible meeting for you to set up for final review and possible recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, or possible denial to the Board of Commissioners, would be June 24th. So this agenda item is on here today for the Planning Commission to set up that final meeting.
Do we want to look at it that earlier, or do we want to give it a little bit longer?
That's your next board meet. That's your next meeting.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Rich.
when will the changes get back and sent out to us so we can review what exactly got,
We're shooting
how it
for
got
early
changed?
next week.
Okay.
Oh, you're expecting early next week?
If he can do it this weekend, he will.
That we will get another package like this?
Maybe not bound as beautifully, but probably sent out, and we'll probably to expedite some things, we might be actually making the copies in-house.
I see, okay. And my only comment, and I know this is extremely petty, but inasmuch as this is going to be a formal document to dictate up to 2040, I merely hope that the man with whom I spoke makes punctuation corrections, as I indicated.
Okay.
And I guess I would like that to go on record, that I requested the punctuation errors be corrected. Thank you.
Any further comments or discussion on that? Is there a motion?
Well,
Oh, Kathy, go ahead.
I mean, maybe I can talk about this before the motion, but, you know, we left it last time. My recollection is that one of the things we left last time was we asked for some additional information in chapter 11, kind of explaining why those items were, you know,
Yes.
given on the implementation, others weren't. And you responded with, you
I was
sent
about to say,
us.
yeah, I thought I got
You
that
did.
done. Okay.
But I guess I don't understand it. I mean, and I don't mean to be so simpleton here, but I honestly, I guess this is my message back to Matrix, maybe you could convey it, is that this to me is written in not in words and the style of writing and the explanation of somebody that does this for a living, knows exactly what they're talking about. But I think it could, you know, they could rewrite it a little bit so that people like myself and others could understand it a little bit. And I mean, like, many policies are specific enough to be applied and carried out directly as consistency with the comprehensive plan is evaluated for future projects and actions. The tools and actions of the county fall into these 8 categories. While many policies can be implemented as part of standard county operations, some policies require specific tools. I just, it's beyond me.
I hear you.
So I appreciate their response here, but I need a little further help with it.
And then my other question, my comment on this is, do we want to review it as early as the 24th, or do we, when we get back from it, I think we need a little bit of time to go through it. I mean, that was a pretty good document. That's the reason why I was asking about that. I know that was the next meeting, but being able to review it and get some time to it, because if they went through it this weekend, then you're talking, we get next week to go through it. I don't know how many of y'all haven't already scheduled things for the weekend, or for the week, but if y'all's schedule looks like mine, you may have scheduled a few things, and that's a pretty large document for us to reread and go through and evaluate. Did they get what our intent was in there, and all those things? I think we should at least push it to the first meeting in July if it was my choice, or any further input would be appropriate.
And that would be July 8th.
And that gives, well, we still have all the time that we need then for advertisement for that, right?
We do it for the 24th as well. Yep.
Okay. I kind of figured you did for the 24th, but I just want to make sure we're good on everything else. So that's just my input on it. So outside of that, I'd entertain a motion unless there's any other comments.
You made a motion?
I said I would entertain a motion to, or we can just, how do you want to word this, to the final meeting? Well, it's not the final meeting.
Yeah. So we already have the 24th. You guys already designated a hearing of this on the 24th.
Oh, so it's already designated to be
For the 24th, right. If you're looking to, are you looking for the 8th? Is that?
Well, we want to be able to review the document and have some time to review that document for a final meeting. Is that
That's what I'm understanding from when we're talking about this. I just don't know if we're gonna have enough time to do it on the 24th, or do we just evaluate it on the 24th after we get their input? Maybe they do a crazy turnaround on the 12th. I don't know.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we push this out further, is there an ultimate deadline for the board to get through this? Are we narrowing the amount of time that they have to look at it?
No, there is not.
No, okay.
No, we'd rather get it right than do it fast.
I would appreciate the extra time, till the 8th of July. And I mean, I guess that there's no harm in having it on the agenda for the 24th because it's a public hearing. So if we get public comments, we can certainly take those. But in terms of us taking final action, I'd appreciate a little more time.
I agree.
And then we can put it in the ad that we plan to take final action on July 8th, at the July 8th meeting.
So we have nothing to lose by giving ourselves more time, so why not?
That's right.
I agree.
That way, if there's somebody,
There's no pressure on anybody else,
right?
right?
Are you just looking for how to have it worded?
Just pulling up the wording for the motions from last time.
So if we want to do the 8th of July, do we also still say the 24th with the?
Well, the 24th is already advertised.
Okay, that's the one already.
Yeah, that's already advertised.
Yeah, we just need a motion to continue the ordinance amendment to the July 8th.
To July 8th.
I make a motion to continue the ordinance amendment to July 8th.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. So you're gonna work on that, trying to get it to us roughly this weekend.
As soon as they get in, where I know.
Tell him we'd love to have it early so we can review. All right. Item number 25.
Item 25, County Board Report. The Board of Commissioners concurred with the Planning Commission's recommendation from the May 28th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. From the May 13th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting, conditional use permit 1906 for Big Game Storage LLC, Chris Peterson, to allow a lighted on-premise sign within 1,500 feet of a residential zoning district or dwelling unit in a general commercial district was appealed and heard before the board on June 4th and was continued until June 18th, 2019 by the board.
Can you remind me of that one?
Yeah, so they have a conditional use permit which has been in existence since 2004 on property off of 44. This was the one where Verizon was trying to get a cell tower for years, and that didn't go forward. So then Joe Burge, who used to own the property, sold the property to Chris Peterson, and with that, the conditional use permit for the storage units kind of rolled into the new owner. So they have a conditional use permit for all of their storage units plus specific number of on-premise and off-premise and signs. Because that conditional use permit limited them for signs, they pursued an additional conditional use permit for an on-premise lighted sign. And there was some concern from the neighbors as to the amount of light and I think basically enjoyment of their own property and the ambient and it shining on them. So it was basically continued for time for the board members to go out and visit the site.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on that? All right, item 26. I don't see any public. Item 27, items from the staff.
Items from staff, just a building permit report for May 2019. Overall, down 31% from this time last year. We issued 267 building permits at the end of May this year, and last year was 387. One of the few items that seems to be going up steadily is the non-residential additions, garages, barns, that kind of thing. Otherwise, everything kind of seems to be holding steady and going down.
Any questions?
If I may
Go ahead,
ask,
Jim.
the economy throughout the country is booming, so why is this? Is this just? I mean, it's gone on for a number of months.
I don't think there's been an up month since January.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do not know.
Not that we're doing anything wrong or you're doing anything wrong, but
no.
I'm just sort of curious about why there's Box Elder and all these little towns gobbling up all of our developed developable land or what? I don't know. Anyway, there's no answer. Okay.
Yeah, we can't figure it out. We're not really sure what's going on out there. I mean, we had the big ones last year because of, under canvas, if you remember that, the big thing down by Hill City. But also this year, just alone, they submitted 80 individual building permits. So without that, we would have been significantly lower.
I think lots of snow and lots of rain, it impedes it quite a bit.
Yeah, and we anticipated that during those months, but we thought it would at least pick up in May, and it hasn't. So either we're going to get clobbered this month
Sure.
or next, or it's not coming. Because this is building permit time season. It really is. With everybody coming back to their season, their vacation homes or whatever. They want to put up a carport. They want to put up a garage. This is the time that they do it. So,
Maybe it's hard to find labor.
well, maybe.
They go to the
A lot of
labor
these, I know our
camps.
do-it-yourself deals, but, a lot of these people obviously hire people. Anyway.
Was this time last year much higher than the same time in 2017?
We don't go back. We'd have to go back and look at 2017 and let you know.
Because I'm just thinking if we're relative to last year, maybe last year was just a really good year. Maybe we're back down to normal.
It was so good that this year couldn't begin to
Yeah.
All right, anything else? Items from the membership? Nothing from anybody?
I'm sorry, what did you ask?
Items from the membership?
How are we coming on interviewing potential people to serve on this planning commission?
So interviews and recommendations are done, and it was brought before the Board of Commissioners from the interview panel's recommendation last meeting. At the next board meeting is when they will they'll do whatever type of interview they want and then make their appointments at that time.
So we can't know who it was,
Oh,
how
it's-
it was narrowed down?
No, what do you mean by no? It's public. It was on the agenda. Not our agenda, it was on the board agenda.
It was recommended that Rich Marsh and, I don't remember the other gentleman's
Jeffrey,
name.
I can't
Jeffrey.
remember the other guy's name.
Jeffrey
Thank you.
Last name.
Right.
I mean, are you leaving?
Nope, I plan on being at that meeting and having
Okay,
a
good.
conversation, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was my
Wigan, thank
question.
you. Jeffrey Wigan.
Jeffrey Wigan, there you go. So, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else from the membership? All right, outside of that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? signify-
Oh, Sonny beat me.
Who wants to do the second? Because I heard three so moved.
Second.
I second myself.
So second from Sonny. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you.